He wants to bring Putin here. He wants to shake hands and raise hands saying we're in a new era. That's what he wants. That is the ideal for him. Whether he gets that, who knows? But he wants it, and he seems to be trying for it. I want to bring on my guests. We're joined with Andrei Telizhenko. Andrei Telizhenko. Oh, come on, calendar. There we are. Andrei Telizhenko. He is a Ukrainian whistleblower and former diplomat. Andrei, man, thank you for joining me again. How are you doing today? You doing all right?
Hi, Jamal. Hi, everybody. Doing great. Great weather. Spring is out in the air, so hopefully peace talks are in the way. Hopefully things will go the way it's planned.
Well, they do seem to be on the way. Apparently, well, as I pointed out, Trump and Putin talked 2 days ago. Those talks centered around effectively, Trump saying he wants a ceasefire, Putin telling him no, and having a larger conversation over Ukraine. And Witkoff and Putin also talked. Witkoff says we're weeks away from a deal. Okay, that is I'm very skeptical of that. But Witkoff is like, we're weeks away from a deal. Now, weeks, they're weeks in 50 years, right? So we're a million weeks away from a deal. Okay, fair enough, whatever. But weeks away from a deal, saying that Putin and Trump agree on the grand contours of whatever that deal is. I suspect what that means is that the regions that Russia is taken, or as they say, liberated, are going to remain under Russian auspices. And for obvious reasons that the US and Europe can't do anything about it. So even this notion of Crimea, like all of these issues, I would imagine were brought up. And they're saying we are close to a deal. Immediately after the 30-day ceasefire was agreed upon, Ukraine, under Zelensky, flips out and attacks the energy sector, the exact part of the agreement that Trump came up with. So it's like, yeah, we agree upon the 30-day ceasefire, and then Ukraine immediately breaks the ceasefire to get across. We're not on board for this process. I'm fascinated by this dynamic because it's effectively a proxy of the U.S. blowing off the fact that the principal in the war. What the hell?
I'm here. I can
That
see.
was weird. I'm sorry. That was weird. Let me get your take.
Oh, first of all,
Trump, real quick, Trump needs somebody in Ukraine. Is my major point that I'm trying to get at before I was interrupted by whoever that was. He needs somebody in Ukraine. And I guess my thing is there someone currently in Ukraine that can take over the reins of government and work with him? Or not so much, that for the most part, the only people who are there are the Banderites, the fascists, the right wing, and that none of them are in a position or will be willing to make a deal with Trump in order to end this. And one last question. Could they make a deal? Meaning, even if Zelensky wanted to, would he be able to do that, considering the people who are around him?
In Ukraine, there's no opposition at all. Unfortunately, that is the situation. The people who are so-called opposition, or whatever you call them, Poroshenko, Timoshenko, the political road that there were talks with Trump Jr. and Kushner and Witkoff. Yeah, they're there, but are they opposition? No, they're not, because Poroshenko is a Biden guy, Burisma guy, Biden guy, the guy who was after the coup placed by Newland and Biden to rule Ukraine. Big oligarch, a lot of chocolate factories, a lot of corruption under him, very greedy. Will even though he's a billionaire, will choke on a $100 bill just to get it. That's him, as I said. But he's owned by the West, like the deep state. Not in America. He's owned by the deep state, by Newland, and he will go around to anybody who's going to buy him out. But the problem is he is the one who did not implement fully the Minsk agreements. He
Right.
signed them under when there was the Ilovaisk and the Baltseva, when the Ukraine army was being destroyed in eastern Ukraine by the free people in Donbass. And then they said, "Oh, we'll sign a peace deal." So that's when Minsk One, Minsk Two happened during those situations. In Ukraine, when always there's a situation, they always already sign a peace deal. Then they basically just throw it away.
Wait,
Same
real
thing.
quick, to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt you on that. So that's kind of my point. Like, Boris Johnson, I have the clip somewhere. Boris Johnson made a point of saying, yeah, we signed the Minsk agreements, Zelensky did. However, Zelensky couldn't implement those agreements because he had a hard right wing that would not allow him to do so.
The
And that's kind of the
hard
whole,
right wing is controlled by the Secret Service of Ukraine, which is controlled by the CIA and the other intel agencies. That's what I've been talking about the last year and a half. If Trump really wants peace, get out the intel groups out of Ukraine, the CIA, even the FBI is there, even though it's not allowed to be foreign soil doing these things. They are there. Get them out of Ukraine. There's 16 intel agencies on the Ukrainian soil. Get them out of there. All the biolabs, all the radical Nazi groups. They're the ones who are being controlled by the West, by the deep state. You get the CIA out of Ukraine, and CIA, I mean, even all the other agencies. All these right wing groups are going to fall apart because there's nobody to control. They're all like radical, real radical guys who are in there for the money. They don't. The heads of those organizations are not in there for the idea. Maybe the people in the middle are, because I was advising to the first deputy prime minister of Ukraine, overseeing Ukraine intelligence, law enforcement, and all that kind of issues. And I had files on all these radical right wing Banderites, Nazi group, like people who were there. And we know what would really is happening. They're all controlled. They take away the control, they're going to fall apart. Or the government, the real law enforcement can actually take them apart if they're not controlled by anybody or coordinated or supported. The same as Azov. Azov was being coordinated by the Jamestown Foundation. There were people who were flying into DC to talk to this group, and then they were being taught on foreign relations and all these intel classes and all that kind of stuff. And then they're flown back to Ukraine to coordinate these groups. So these are like it's all coordinated. Same with I said, Poroshenko. He's coordinated. He cannot be in a position. He didn't go with the Minsk. He didn't sign it. He signed it, but he didn't implement it, even though Ukraine voted for this in the United Nations. And he could have had no war. The same with Zelensky. He could have done the same thing. But it's all being coordinated by the West. They're playing this game, cat and mouse, that, oh, they're good and they're bad. But no, they're all the same. The radicals, Poroshenko, Tymoshenko, Yatsenyuk, Arestovich, coordinated by Novichkin, who sold off Yanukovych after the coup to Newland and Biden, and then he's protected by the CIA right now. Yeah. Also, Dubinsky. I'm very heartbroken that this guy is in prison for political crimes that he did not commit. Nobody
right.
should be in prison. He's a member of parliament. He should be in the parliament. The people voted for him. But the question is, there's 15,000 other political prisoners. Gonzalo Lira, one of them, a U.S. citizen. None of them had a possibility to go online and shout out and speak out and tweet and publish tweets on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube about their political position and criticize Zelensky and that regime. None of those 15,000 official by the United Nations political prisoners in Ukraine, together with Gonzalo Lira, a U.S. citizen, did not have a chance to do what Dubinsky's doing. My question is, what did he sell out to be able to do this? That he's not being shot after what maybe he can write a tweet. He writes a tweet, but then he's going to get killed, shot, or whatever happens. Going to have something happen to him in prison, like to Gonzalo Lira. And that's it. Maybe he sold out to something. Maybe he sold out to Kolomoisky, the person he worked for. I don't know. I was not there. But so there's no opposition. Problem is, it's all coordinated. There's all people who are working under somebody who's working within the deep state. The Kiev regime today, Zelensky is working with the deep state. Poroshenko deep state, Tymoshenko deep state. Her husband has businesses in Czech Republic and the United States, which is coordinated by the U.S. intel groups. So there's nobody who's loyal to Ukraine or loyal to the peace talks that Trump wants to happen. They all hate Trump because he is not from their so-called team. That is the biggest problem. And that is my question. There's nobody in Ukraine that Trump can trust today. Anybody who's out of Ukraine, there's some people who left that can be trusted. I'm not saying about myself, I'm saying there's other people. Look at those people who want to talk about peace for the last 10 years in Ukraine. Focus on those people. Maybe they're toxic, but at least they wanted peace. They didn't want war. All these political crowds that are in Kiev today, and some of them who are not in Kiev, in London and other places, have been talking about war all this time. We didn't didn't care. Like Arestovich, he was part of the warmongers. He was there promising people that this war is going to end in 3 days, saying, I'm going to send a bottle of cognac to Putin if he takes the LNR and DNR republics. That's what his quote. That's what he said when the war started, and he was happy about it. But then when the West failed to cripple Russia, and he fled Ukraine, and then understood that he's going to become the controlled opposition, being financed by Novechkin, by Akhmetov, or other guys from the Zelensky crowd who are money laundering their money. And then these people are going to, what the issue is, these people are going to come in, not only continue the war, but continue the money laundering process for the deep state through Ukraine. That's why there's no real opposition that is going to come in and clean house. And even if Trump's going to make a deal with Poroshenko, Timoshenko, even if they're going to promise their loyalty to him, they're going to be still owned because there's a file on them within the deep state and the globalists, Soros, CIA, whatever. They're going to be controlled by them, and they're going to be still working against the president of the United States, against the interest of Ukraine, first of all. Don't want peace with Russia. And that is the biggest problem here. They're going to be money laundering the money that's still going to go through Ukraine. So there's nobody to trust out of those people. That's what they did. The West did. They toxified anybody else who wanted peace. They made left the politicians who can be trusted for the deep state in Ukraine. So if Trump will make a deal, they'll still sabotage those agreements. Yes, they won't be like Zelensky, like whatever he is. Oh crap, sorry, but
No, you're fine.
but they will be warmongers and representing the warmongering machine, and they will sabotage Trump in any way possible. Maybe as not as open as Zelensky, but they will still work for the globalists against Russia. Even though these people had businesses in Russia, Poroshenko had businesses in Russia, he still bombarded Donbass and killed 15,000 people under his leadership. They cannot be
So,
Timoshenko, the same thing, like in Yatsenyuk and all these people. And like I said, a lot of questions about Arestovich, questions about Dubinsky, a lot, because that's like illogical for me what is happening. Yeah, maybe they're saying the right things, but they're not
just
logical.
your point is, even if they get rid of Zelensky, even if they get rid of Zelensky, that the government that's currently there, meaning anybody who they would put in the political space, is effectively a tool.
Yes,
The right wing has effectively infiltrated all of the mechanics of Ukraine's government. And even if
not
you get rid of Zelensky, anybody who you put in is still, how can I say it? Even if they're saying the right things, are effectively controlled and are not necessarily coming from direct elections from the public itself. It's
of course.
effectively somebody who is, somebody else backing them in their decision making.
Of course, that's why the United States, together with Russia, needs to sit down and work out a situation where there's going to be a neutral government confirmed by both sides that it's going to come into power in Ukraine, lead Ukraine into elections, have free elections where there's going to be opposition, real opposition involved in this. Then it can go on TV. Get out of, and also have all these Ukrainians who are abroad be able to come back openly with the border, so they will know that the border is not closed, that they can leave them back and forth if needed, so they can come back and vote, because it's impossible for a lot of those to come back and vote from Europe. There's more than 6 million in Europe Ukrainians. They cannot physically all vote. There's not a possibility to do that for the embassies of Ukraine, so they can have those people come back and vote to Ukraine, have an open border for them, so they know they'll truly get out. That's one thing. Second of all, there's 1.3 million Ukrainians in Russia, and right now who fled from this war to Russia. Think about a possibility for them to vote, because they're going to vote for an opposition that's going to be peace with Russia. Also, they have a right for their vote. They're Ukrainian citizens. So this has to be all worked out together. The United States cannot just come in and say, we're going to want this and we want that. They don't know what they want, because they don't know what is happening on the ground. The new administration, they want something good for Ukraine to happen. Trump wants peace for Ukraine. I do believe that, and I trust Trump, and that's why I supported him throughout these years, even though I was falsely sanctioned by Pompeo, the guy the globalists and the warmongers, and people like Pence and Mnuchin. But I do believe in Trump and his team and his family. They can bring peace not only to Ukraine but around the world. But they need to understand how to do it right, or to have people who will consult them and work out together with Russia from both angles, because Russia also knows what is on the situation on the ground, maybe even more, much more than the United States, because it's bordering with Ukraine and we were
Right.
one country. for more than 350 years, so it knows what is happening there, because Ukraine is, when Ukrainians speak Russian, it's the same as in Russia all over the place. So we have no even differences, and we have no accent in the same Russian. So there's a big accent in Belarus and other places, in Georgia or other Soviet countries, Ukraine and Russia, hardly no
Yeah.
accent. So you cannot tell them apart, which is different. So we have to understand that this has to be intercombined. America doesn't only have the last word on this, and has to go forward. And also, Trump needs to understand that if he keeps the CIA on the ground in Ukraine, it will sabotage through all these right-wing groups and radical Nazi groups like Azov, the right sector, and everything else that is left there in Ukraine. I don't know, there's a bunch of them. They will sabotage and coordinate them, so they will undermine any peace deals also. If the politician even agrees, those radicals will come in and basically they're terrorists. They're going to do terrorist acts against politicians in Ukraine. Leave the CIA out of Ukraine, and then the new government, the neutral government, will handle those terrorists on the ground on its own. And Ukraine will basically bring peace to Ukraine much faster than it can happen,
Yeah.
whatever's
Otherwise,
happening right now.
yeah, your point is, even if Zelensky was not so committed to the war and wanted to end it, there would be a man with a gun standing behind him, threatening him to not sign anything in regards to a peace deal. Okay, that's problematic for getting anything accomplished.
That's
I
one
want to
thing,
get
but
your
Zelensky wants war. The problem with Zelensky, he wants war because
right.
he believes he has no physical other chance, because he understands that's his way to stay in power. I believe, and I knowing Zelensky, meeting with him a couple of times personally after the elections, after he became president, officially at that time. Now he's not officially. He does want war. He's a very bad, he's a bully character figure, not a good person, and he doesn't believe in any values and values of somebody older, somebody younger, that he needs to listen to something that somebody maybe knows better. He only knows that he's right, and
I,
that's his problem. So with him, that's a different story. But anybody else, other politicians, or they'll have some radical group, terrorist group on the ground, have a gun to their head, or they'll have Newland and the deep state and Soros and CIA having their file in their hands, and they'll have a criminal case against them or sanction them against around the globe, and they'll have all their money frozen, assets frozen, because they're all in the West. So there's a big problem from both
yeah,
sides in this situation.
I want to get to a clip from Arestovich. You mentioned Arestovich was Zelensky's spin doctor, to give a term for him. I'm fascinated by this clip because it's what it means. That is the fascination here. The notion that you would knowingly go into a catastrophic war is amazing to me. And yet, that is what Arestovich is saying in this clip, that they understood that they would have to go into a war in order to get into NATO.
То есть, если Украина получает выдачу в НАТО, то тогда мы можем
Тогда
говорить
мы-
о каких-то
Да.
сроках прекращения войны.
Нет, ни о каких сроках прекращения войны мы не будем говорить. Наоборот, это, скорее всего, подтолкнет к крупной военной операции России против Украины. Потому что они должны нас будут просадить в...
Now, for the American audience that don't speak the language, what he's saying is, well, we understood that us going the route that we were going was going to prompt Russia to have a full military campaign in order to prevent us from being part of NATO. Effectively, this is what we need to do in order to become part of this organization. Okay, that is amazing that they go into it knowing that. That's the part that blows my mind when dealing with this. It's like, you are going into a war with Russia in order to be part of NATO, a military organization that is supposed to protect you from Russia. So obviously, you're not under threat because you're trying to get into a military organization. The very act of getting into the organization, however, will create the threat. And yet we got to go through that birth of fire. That is mind-blowing. Like, as you point out, you were around during the time that all of this was taking place. Give me your take on this clip and what Arestovich is saying.
Look, everybody knew on Ukraine, and not just me going around during the time. I left the government in 2016, officially resigned from any government position that I was having at the time, and then
This clip took place in 2019.
Yes, and then publicly went into opposition to Poroshenko, and then was working with consulting people like Paolo Fuchs, who was financing Zelensky at that time. So I knew all those was happening behind the closed doors. And the problem was about NATO and Ukraine. Everybody knew about this. When I was studying in the U.S. in the 2000s. We had our political science professor talk about this and saying if Ukraine joins NATO, there's going to be World War III. Everybody knew about this was 20, and this is this is like if Mexico or Canada would join China or be part of China. Everybody knew that'd be war. The same thing here. And even though they knew that this was going to happen, they knew Zelensky sold out to the British. I think in June or July 2019 when he became the president of Ukraine. He went to the MI6. He met with the head of MI6, him, Yermak, and some other people around him. And so they basically knew that they're going to have war. That's why they had the so-called big building project in Ukraine, where they basically wiped out billions of dollars on building roads and infrastructure, which was hardly built. And then the war started, so they had all that money in their pockets, and the West closed their eyes on this. So basically, they let Zelensky become a billionaire, multi-billionaire, throughout not just the war, but before the war. And that's why he put Kolomoisky to prison, because Kolomoisky wanted to make a peace deal with the Russian Federation in 2021. He knew that the war is going to happen. Everybody knew that it was leading to war. Ukraine is not doing anything to implement fully the Minsk agreements to get back Donbass as an autonomy, which Russia agreed on and everybody agreed on, the Donbass agreed on. Everything was just, Ukraine just had to ratify in the parliament and say, yes, we can make it happen. And Zelensky had that authority, he had the majority, full majority in the parliament to do that, constitutional majority. So basically, he didn't do anything. He didn't do nothing. He was just smeared on Putin when they were meeting about the Minsk agreements. And they knew that this war was going to happen because they were being prepared for this war. And no one was preparing for this war when the coup was happening. They knew that Russia was going to take over Crimea in 2014, take it back for security reasons, because that's where their naval base is, the largest naval base in the Black Sea, which they had it for hundreds of years. It's historically Russian, that territory basically. So, and it was done peacefully, but they knew they had to take the bait for Russia, to have Russia come in and have the Ukrainians hate Russia for doing that. So that's what they did. They basically let Russia take Crimea. Then when Donbass was, people were pros in Donbass to leave Ukraine. The director of CIA, Brennan, gave an order. I was in the meeting to fire the shit out of the people in Donbass because they were fighting for Russian values, for Russian language. That was a director of CIA giving an order to the acting president, Turchinov, after the coup in Ukraine in April 2014, to bombard Donbass from choppers through. And then this happens, and this was moving forward.
Say that one more time. You said the U.S. president.
No, the director of CIA,
Brennan, director of CIA, gave an order to bomb the people of Donbass. Is that what you just said?
Yeah. I was in the meeting. Aaron Mate wrote an article last year about this, and he quotes me on the 10 years and what's happening in Ukraine under foreign rule. He quotes me on this because I was in the meeting. There was a few people who were in that meeting, and I was the only one who spoke out because this is what was really happening on the situation there. And that's where it led to. This war was all coordinated by the West. It was a proxy war, not only against Russia today, but against Ukrainians on the ground, just because they wanted to speak the Russian language and have their church, their values in it. So the U.S. was behind all of this from the beginning. They knew that Crimea was going to be taken in February 2014. They knew that Donbass was going to be shelled because they gave that order. Then they made Ukraine fight Russia, even though Ukraine could have signed. There was numerous meetings with Russia right before the war, in December 21, in January 22, in February 22, when they were saying, have the U.S. agree that Ukraine is not going to join NATO, and there will be no war. But no, the West said NATO doors. Biden administration said the NATO doors are open for everybody. We cannot say that, and there was not just the question of joining Ukraine in NATO, but the question of NATO being ready on NATO boots on Ukrainian ground. There are 3 military bases in southern Ukraine. The Brits, the Canadians, the Americans were there. There were biolabs. There were there were missiles in Ukrainian soil, NATO owned. There were full armed Ukrainian military, which is coordinated and controlled by NATO. And it was not just a country peaceful to Russia. Ukraine was made an anti-Russia political means. Everything Russian, everything Soviet was destroyed. If you think about or read Soviet books, you would be put to prison or put on trial or have to pay a fine. If you'd go out and commemorate the people who fought in World War II, your grandfathers, for fighting the Soviet army, for liberating Europe from the Nazis, you would get beat up by the radicals, and the police would throw you to prison. This was the reality in Ukraine on the ground. So this was like, it was happening for years and years and years, and the West was controlling this. They were coordinated by the globalists, the deep state, the Obama administration, the Biden administration. And today, if Trump wants this to stop, he needs to get the US out of Ukraine. Then Ukraine can have its sovereignty back. Until then, Ukraine is not sovereign, independent. There's going to be dozens of Zelenskys, dozens of Zelensky's. Zelensky is not a good character. Also, they're pushing him PR that he's going to be next president, but he was the one who was sending all those young guys, soldiers to the front lines to die. He knew that the Russian army is stronger, and then they were lying about this. So it was they're all involved. They all have to be put on trial for destroying a country like Ukraine. Millions of Ukrainian soldiers are dead because of them. 67,000 Ukrainian soldiers are dead in the Kursk region. And now the Ukraine is fleeing that region, retreating from that region. For what? For PR, an American PR to make more money for Lindsey Graham, for make more money for the Biden administration, for Sullivan, for all that crap. That is the biggest problem here. And if Ukraine would be sovereign independent, this war would never happen. We would solve our differences with Russia, drinking a bottle of vodka together, and our differences would go away. That's what we did before. Even though Ukraine was stealing gas from Russia throughout these 30 years of independence, Russia would still give a good deal for Ukraine because they understood it's on our border. We were on the borderline. We were one country before.
Yeah.
We were one nation. We can solve our differences together. Today you steal our gas. Tomorrow we're going to raise the prices a bit, but we're going to give you a good deal on it also. Everybody's going to win-win in this situation, and that's it. But no, the West had to intervene. The West had to destroy this whole situation. The West had to Hillary Clinton put in its fake church in Ukraine, which is now taking over the church, which with a 1,000-year history. And this is the craziness that's happening. And Trump, I hope he understands, and Trump Jr. and his family and everybody around the Trump administration today, get out of Ukraine. If you get out, this war is going to end. Stop financing this. Stop financing this regime. The people of Ukraine will not lose. The regime in Ukraine will lose. The so-called opposition, which is controlled by the deep state, which wants to F you over, will lose. But the people will win because they're going to get their lives back. And it's going to be settled really faster, much faster, really in a couple of weeks. If Russia and real Ukrainian government, who's going to think about Ukrainians, not the money, but Ukrainians will settle this together. And the U.S. will be a good moderator in this because they left Ukraine and they're really going to be moderating now because they're part of the conflict, unfortunately, because they're giving weapons to Ukraine.
Just to be clear, how do you... I've had this conversation with another guest, and they pointed out that effectively the Nazi-inspired government needs to be pulled out root and shaft. That in order to get any kind of deal, in order to have any sort of Trump's man, and I'm saying Trump's man, I think you would say somebody who's looking out for the best interests of Ukraine and wants to be out of the war. I think those people would be very similar. I think to your point is you don't want Trump's man because Trump's man is still Trump's man. You want somebody Ukrainian. And I agree with you, by the way. I think your point is the only way to do that is to get MI6, the CIA, get these intel services out of the country because they have been to the detriment of Ukraine. And they have fundamentally supported neo-Nazi and right-wing groups as opposed to allowing Ukraine to be whatever Ukraine is in its electoral system. How do you do that? I think that's the question, right? Like, how do you get all of these people out of their offices? How do you get these Nazis and depower the Nazification of the country? I don't have an answer for that. I don't even know if Trump has an answer for that. Give me a take.
First of all, yeah, it has to be a person who's going to be pro-Ukrainian, like a real Ukrainian, like the Ukrainian that was there peaceful, the breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine, not the Nazi after 2014, bad zombie Ukraine, whatever you call it. The breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine, that's the person you have to have who's going to take care about the farmers, the people, the agriculture, the industry, which is going to be left, whatever's going to be left there in Ukraine, and who's going to be ready to work and build Ukraine over from the ground up. That's what that person, and who's going to also respect the Trump administration, and who's going to respect the Putin administration, and the Belarus administration, the Hungarian administration, who's not going to be against everybody and saying you owe us, everybody owes us, and we hate you, but because you're giving us any money, we're not going to hate you, we're going to hate you tomorrow if you're going to stop. No, a normal leader and a statesman. That's what Ukraine needs. Second of all, who's going to respect everybody on both sides and with a good relationship with the United States. And I'm saying that the United States has to leave Ukraine for now and keep its diplomatic corps, but leave all the CIA, MI6, and everything. It has to be an order by the President of the United States. Executive order, leave Ukraine. I think he knows what's happened there. He can have the classifications on his table, declassified documents, what's happening, who's responsible for this. Look what they came up with USAID. Tons of documents, tons of craziness, what was happening. They're financing whatever projects around the globe, which were nonsense. And today the same thing. They can do it through the intel agencies and give them those documents on Trump's table. And people like Kash Patel, even though he's FBI, but he's a trusted man. He knows foreign politics pretty well, from what I understand, looking his interviews. And other people like General Flynn can advise and get it out of there. You're going to save, not just only you're going to get Ukraine sovereign and bring peace, but you're going to save billions of dollars, because that's, I think, another just drain hole where U.S. is spending so much money. As soon as they get out with an executive order, you have a neutral sovereign government agreed upon by both sides parties at this time, Washington and Moscow, put in place in Kiev, and they will, if there's going to be no support from outside for these Nazi groups, that government will clean house. And that was, I think, we put one agenda on their point, to clean the house for neo-Nazis, put them on trial, and for people to see within the first 3-4 months of their governments. I think if that happens, there's going to be no protection from the West of these Nazi groups. People know who they are, like people in the government.
Yeah.
If I was there 10 years ago, like how long ago was it? Yeah, 10 years ago, I was in that position. And I know who these people are. They're still there. Some of them are dead, but most of them are still there. You can easily clean them. You're going to have the right law enforcement, the right law enforcement groups, and they will be put on trial. Nobody's saying that it has to be undemocratic. It has to be open. People need to see who these people are and what they did. And they have to be questioned on trial to publicly say what crimes they committed, not only against Russians, but what happened, what crimes they committed in Ukraine, in Odessa, firing up the building with 50 people who were fried up there. I was in that building after the fire happened. We came there with a government delegation, but we had to close our investigation because radicals came in and said, "Oh, we're going to take over now." And I saw those bodies fired up in Odessa in May 2nd, 2014. Answer for all those crimes that happened in Ukraine during the war, before the war, and whatever. And it's all going to lead to peace. Give the people in Ukraine the truth, which they deserve, and people will not just. I'm not saying that you're going to forget about this war. We had a civil war 100 years ago between Russia and Ukraine, Belarus, like the White Army and the Red Army. There was one country, Russian Empire. Millions of people died, more than today, and the country united together was one country during the Soviet times. Fought the World War II together, won it, and there were no problems. The same thing here. Just bring back people their lives. Get a normal government that's going to be trustworthy for them. We're going to respect international relations, everybody around them, the United States and Russia. And then there's going to be peace in Ukraine. And get the CIA out of there. You're going to save billions of dollars. You don't need to have to look anywhere else. This is the way out.
Andre, this is, I would say, an explosive interview. It is, and you're probably right. And not just probably right, you are right that they overthrew that government in 2014 and they were using Nazis to do it. And so, look, from your mouth to God's ears, I hope that is a sane government that we get that works in the best interest of Ukraine. And I hope Trump acknowledges that and at the very least on some level work towards that. Andre, thank you for this. Andre Telizhenko, he is a Ukrainian whistleblower and a former diplomat and a damn good friend of the show. Thank you, Andre. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamal. God bless. All the best to you guys.
You have a good one, man. Be safe. Thank you.